Hello everyone. Today in our second academic skills presentation, we're going to learn about being an effective researcher. The presentation will focus on finding relevant information to help you learn about the topic and respond to your assessment task. Being a researcher means being an active learner, asking questions, making connections, and thinking critically about what you're reading. Reading is fundamental to your learning at university. You need to know how to read strategically to make the most of your reading time. At university, research and referencing go together. And APA, the 7th edition, is the most widely used referencing style at Charles Sturt. Many people are surprised and sometimes overwhelmed by the amount of time it takes to do the research and reading necessary for a successful assessment task. And that's why it's best to start early with your reading and spend a bit of time getting to know how to use the library search facilities effectively in the databases, that kind of thing. Gathering information includes things like reading and analysing the assignment question, and this can take longer than you might anticipate sometimes. It's best to really investigate what your assignment question is asking, and this can take an hour or so. Then you can brainstorm all the elements of a task. And it takes time, but it's well worth it to understand the question fully, making sure that your writing stays relevant and answers the assignment question and maximises your marks in that way. Understanding the question thoroughly will help you focus your research effectively. Gathering information also includes rereading course materials and locating the relevant research, which will help you build and provide evidence for your assignments. Primo Search is the library's search engine at Charles Sturt that can help you find relevant resources for your assignments. If you haven't used it, I highly recommend you head to the library homepage and check that out. There are tutorials and guides to help you out understand how to use that effectively too. Primo can help you identify relevant academic resources, and you need to enter your key terms, which will be part of your assignment question. And you can think about how to identify those as you analyse and brainstorm for your assessment task. Then you've got to plan and write drafts of your assignment. We at Academic Skills also have an assignment feedback service, and you can find that in the Study Success tab in Interact 2, but also in the student portal, and I'll provide some links as well. Ideally, you would spend even more time than that, but up to 20 hours on an assessment task, depending on the weighting of it, but you might not always have a lot of time. Even with that amount of time, you need to stay focused, learn to limit your research to allow a good understanding without completely distracting you from your other subjects and commitments. The next step in analysing the task is to pay attention to task words. And task words tell you how you should write your assignment, what text type to use, and as the slide here explains, task words are usually verbs, those action words. Remember, some assignments are broken up into different parts, so there might be more than one task word in an assignment. So in analysing the question, spending an hour thereabouts, carefully considering what is being asked and defining key terms can save hours of work and ensure that your answer is relevant. You want to make sure that you're answering the right assignment question and that you're maximising your marks. A great tip is to use 3 different coloured highlighters, and it could be one for the general topic, one for the focus or limiting words, and then one for the task words, those verbs. And once you've got the assignment, the assessment task worked out, then you can move on to planning towards your assessment task. You've got your assignment here. Think about how you might approach that. Spend some time going through, analysing the task, And then you too can plan your assessment task, how you might approach, how you're going to answer your assignment question. So when we come to this stage of planning, we might be dividing our time into chunks. And when we think about research, it's going to be a very time consuming aspect of writing your assignment or doing your assignment. It's very time intensive, so we need to make sure that we do that efficiently and effectively. So in our planning, in our brainstorming, we're going to start with making a note of everything that you already know and how you might approach the assignment question. You could use a graphic organizer like a mind map to help you recognise what you need to find out. A mind map is it's a pictorial way of planning, radial structure like the spokes of a bicycle wheel. So you might put the central idea in the middle and then have the different, the concepts coming out from it that way. It's a little bit different to a concept map, as a concept map has more like a tree structure with many branches or clusters. A mind map focuses on one idea, while a concept map connects multiple concepts or ideas. The process of creating a mind map can be fast and spontaneous as well. On the other hand, concept maps might have a lot more detail and cover as much information as possible and might be helpful for things like exam revision. But they are things that you might like to use and investigate in terms of helping you understand tasks and be able to learn effectively. A couple of mind mapping apps include Poplet and Go Conqueror. You could also just do it old school on a piece of paper and map it out, writing it down that way as well. Gaps in your knowledge might also come up, include understanding of particular words or concepts, phrases, that kind of thing. So check subject readings, but also look up in dictionaries. You might even have subject-specific dictionaries that are located on the subject library guides and the library website as well. So the questions that arise when you analyse the topic, listen to lectures, do your readings, can guide your learning and help you get the most out of your reading. And key strategies to keep in mind are always reading with a purpose and keeping your task in mind as you read. So that's being really purposeful in what you're doing. And in finding sources of information, interactions with your lecturer can help, as well as your fellow students. They can also bounce ideas so that we can help clarify our understanding of the topic and check that we're on the right track, give us new perspectives on the topic, that kind of thing. So make sure you stay engaged in class interactions, whether that's online forum, meeting rooms, that kind of thing. If you've got a subject that has got a prescribed text, you could look particularly at those, any recommended or required readings. Make sure that you understand the concepts involved. That's the purpose of them. The subject coordinator wants you to understand the learning that comes about by reading those particular texts. If you are worried about all the reading that you need to do, we have got a couple of resources, video clips, one called Reading Resilience and another one called Becoming a Critical Reader. And reading is a skill, and it's something that if you're not much used to it or reading in longer chunks and time periods, it might be that you build up to it, like exercise, something like Couch to 5K. You're not going to go from being a couch potato to being able to run a marathon. You've got to build up to it, and it might be that you read for as much as you can handle by still being able to take in the information and then build on that as you go. But you can use those different videos that can help you understand how to be an effective reader as well. Other sources of information? Well, in our everyday lives, we might use a range of different sources of information, Dr. Google, for example. But when we have got our when we've got our assignments to include information, we need to make sure that our sources that we're using are relevant, credible, and authoritative. So if you look at the different things that we could potentially get information from, they don't always fulfill that criteria. So make sure that you keep your critical thinking caps on to make sure that you are able to understand what is being understood, what is being communicated, and it is information that is relevant, credible, and authoritative. So relevant relates closely to the topic and issues that you need to focus on, that are providing current information based on research and not out-of-date views. Credible means possibly that it's published in a scholarly journal or the website of a recognised organisation or public institution. If it's published in a book, there's some credibility there, but you still have to use your critical judgment. Look if it uses language accurately, presents evidence to support claims, i.e. does it have references in its own work, that kind of thing. And if it's authoritative, well, the authors might be a recognised authority on the particular topic that they're talking about. Have they got a recognised position or status in the field? Others refer to this source as an authority, as a recommended source. Got a link there on the screen too to the library's tutorial resource on what does peer review actually mean. You might find that useful as well. So searching for information can be time consuming, and it can be very difficult to choose the most relevant information when you have millions of items to choose from. So Primo search in the library narrows the results, but we still need to know how to refine and limit our searches so that we don't have to sift through lots of irrelevant information. Google Scholar can also help us narrow results, and you can use the library tutorials to help how to set that up and what settings to use and refine your search filters in that way. So that's just an example there of comparing the two different sources, the screenshot of Google Scholar and of the Primo search information. Oops. And I've got a few different links to library tutorials and guides that you might find useful. If you're not quite sure how to use the library, it's really something that would be, in the long run, much more time efficient for you to understand how to use that effectively. So again, just make sure that your information is reliable, because not all information is accurate and reliable. It's important to evaluate the literature that you find, so you can evaluate that information by asking these sorts of questions. The library have what's called a CRAP test. So they're the things that are outlined on the page there. Is it current, relevant, authoritative, and to the purpose as well. So you can ask those sorts of questions about the sources that you may or may not like to include in your work. Make sure that you're thinking critically about the sources that you use, but also the ideas that are in those sources. Now, while searching for relevant information, we need to read quickly. So we can use these strategies to get a quick overview of a text and work out whether it could be useful for us. So to start with, we scan to find specific information within a text, see the spots where within that source, whether it's something that we could use. But then when we've found something useful, we need to read it a bit more thoroughly to be able to get the meaning that was communicated in the text. So seeking the answers to any questions that we might have, the ideas that we want to write about in our own assignments. Those sorts of things can make our reading more purposeful and active as we go through as well. So you can, the bottom half is when we're reading a bit more thoroughly. So with the resources together with this video, you've got a link to an article by Sally Davison. And you might like to pause the video here and answer the questions on the screen. In everyday life, you will be using critical thinking, and you can think about when that might be. Could be voting, buying a car, parenting, shopping, healthcare. That is, whenever we make decisions, we need to weigh up the options, benefits, conditions, etc. So critical doesn't necessarily mean just looking for all the bad things about something, but it involves both positive and negative criticism. So looking at something from a range of different perspectives, not just looking at something simply from face value, but questioning, challenging, thinking about the sorts of things that are important within your discipline. Is cost effectiveness, sustainability, ethics, animal welfare. There might be different things in agriculture. You need to think about approaching different ideas when considering them from a critical perspective. Reading critically involves reading beyond a text to evaluate quality and make comparison with other points of view. It's very important for research and learning. There's a link there to a critical reading checklist if that's something you want to think about more thoroughly in a general sense. But those ideas are things that you need to think about when you read different texts. So when we write notes, there are two main purposes for making notes while we are reading. And the first is that it helps us think critically and actively and purposefully about what we are reading. That helps us retain information. But we also are writing notes because it might be a while between when we do our reading and when we do our writing for our assessment task. So it gives us something concrete to refer back to for future you when you come to write your assessments. So with those things in mind, I've got a few different models that you could use. We've got links to the Cornell method of note taking, and that's one that you could use in terms of how to approach your note taking. But use what's best for you with those two principles in mind of active learning and also have something effective that you can refer back to. So that's the sorts of things that you might like to include in your work that just highlight those things that you can find easily again, but also help you understand. Likewise, you can see all the information there. You need to be able to find it again. So it might be that you file it in a way that makes that obvious to you. So I've got up the top there a topic, also the bibliographic information. So when you are writing notes on a particular work and you want to include that in your assignment, you need to be able to reference it properly. So keeping the reference information, the full bibliographic details together with your notes is really important. On the left-hand side there, I've got a page number, and it might be that you want to refer back to the ideas again, and that makes that a lot easier. Also for referencing, for direct quotes, you must include page numbers with your references, but it's also recommended for paraphrase material. Not something you have to do for paraphrase information, but it's something that is good practice anyway. In the middle there, I've got my notes, and when we're thinking purposefully and actively about why we are reading the particular text, we are narrowing in on the ideas that we want to include. So writing those things down. And then on the right-hand side there's the comments. So reminding future you why you wrote that particular thing down, thinking actively about the ideas. This is significant because this is contrary to the other ideas on this particular topic. This relates to part B of my assignment, or I want to use this in my introduction. Think about why you're reading as you're going. So with those different purposes in mind, active learning and having a concrete reference material that you can look at again, these are things that you might like to include. Use what works best for you. You might like to include things like a summary, but you need to be able to find it again and make the information work for you. So when we are reading critically, we need to consider these sorts of things. So we are thinking about what knowledge is widely agreed. It means reading beyond a text to evaluate quality and make comparisons with other points of view. So when we are referencing at Charleston, generally speaking, we are going to be using APA style, and the 7th edition is the most recent edition there. Why reference? Well, academic integrity is crucial to ensure that you demonstrate you can understand content that is included in your course and ensure that you're able to work safely and professionally in your field. There's some other good reasons why you should be referencing as well, good academic reasons. I've listed some of those there. Obviously, it's that credibility, but it gives credit where credit is due to the original authors of content and allows readers to be able to follow up on ideas further if they would like to do that. If you want to find out more about the academic integrity policy at the university, there is a course that you're able to do and you can use that link there, but it's also on your assignments page as well. That can show you the expectations and support services around academic integrity at Charles Sturt, and that course is also assumed knowledge. So the information contained there is assumed knowledge, and any academic misconduct, you can't claim ignorance about not knowing that you're not allowed to contract cheat or collusion or not reference that appropriately, that kind of thing. So plagiarism is one of the things that might come up in academic misconduct. So we need to make sure that we are being academically honest and that we know the rules around that. The word plagiarism comes from the word plagiaris in Latin. So it's not a very nice word. You're taking something that isn't yours. And it's the deliberate or unintentional use of someone else's work without crediting the original authors. And so if you fail to appropriately acknowledge that you have borrowed the ideas or works of others, then you're plagiarising. And unfortunately, whether it is deliberate or unintentional, penalties can apply. And they can range from a fail grade on your paper, ultimately to exclusion from the university. So not to reference is a serious offence, if that's what you should be doing. So we want to teach you skills in being able to do that, to be academically honest and avoid plagiarism. As I said, serious, we need to make sure that we do it. What should we reference? Whether they're the exact words or ideas of other researchers or writers, images, all sorts of things, we need to acknowledge that we have borrowed these ideas and give credit where credit is due. On the other hand, we do not need to reference things that are common knowledge. There might be some things that are common knowledge in your discipline as well. So if you're not sure, then it's best to ask your lecturer because they're the experts on that particular subject that you're learning about. How do we do that? How do we reference appropriately? In order to be able to correctly reference information that you have sourced from elsewhere, from another person or an organisation, you need to know where you found that information. And sometimes when reading for an assignment, you could fall into the trap of taking notes but forgetting to record the details down where you wrote those sources. That's why I talked about that note taking, why it's important to include that information together with the notes that you're making. So effective note taking is important because if you write some notes and then forgot where you get it from, then you're either going to have to spend a lot of time looking for it again, or you are not going to be able to include it in your work, because if you can't reference it properly, you can't include it in your assignment. Also got some information about paraphrasing there, and that's also something that we'll look at, and Turnitin. Turnitin is a text matching software that you can use, and if you search for plagiarism tools in the university's website, you'll be able to find out how to register for that. And it is something that you can upload your work to, and then you'll get a report back highlighting things that are a bit similar to other sources that they have found. And they have got access to billions of other pages of words of information from the internet, from other student papers, from books, journal articles, and it can tell you where there might be some potentially inadvertent plagiarism errors or some similar phrases that have been used elsewhere. It is a tool. It's not a tick, yes, you have used, you have plagiarized or you haven't. It's a tool, it's a robot. So use your judgment in terms of sometimes there might be some technical words that need to be written down in a string together, for example, but use your judgment. Your lecturers also are able to use Turnitin in big batch loads to be able to check student work too. So it's a tool that you can use to check for any potential referencing errors, to make sure you can do that. Sorry, paraphrasing errors. Just gone past through there. When we are paraphrasing, we are generally doing this more often than direct quotes. Two main reasons here, because it proves to our marker that we understand the content. It also fits smoothly into our own sentences that we are writing towards our assignment. You are the author of your assignment. It needs to be answering the question, and the evidence that you use, the source material, is just there to support the ideas, so they need to fit smoothly into what you are saying. So when you are integrating information, it's really important to be able to integrate that smoothly into your work. When we're paraphrasing, we need to be able to understand the content to be able to express those ideas in our own words. So if you're not quite sure of what you've just read it again. See if there are any words that you don't understand. You could try and look them up. If you don't understand, you could read it again. If there are things that you are still not quite understanding, it might be that you go and read or consume, watch or something, the additional supplementary material to be able to understand the concepts a bit better. But if we are paraphrasing something, it's really an important thing to be able to have a vocabulary around that, but also to understand the concepts. There are some strategies here that you can use to help you paraphrase effectively. You could change the order of information in your text to be able to change it around a bit. You could change the vocabulary. You can use a thesaurus if you get stuck there. You could change words from a verb to a noun or noun to a verb. So noun from like to educate to a noun. A noun is education. The verb would be to educate. So there's different ways that you can change the vocabulary even more. Change from active voice to passive voice. Active voice is I ate lunch. Passive is lunch was eaten. When we are expressing the ideas from the literature, we can't misrepresent them by changing the meaning. But if we are using the ideas that we've read about, we need to make sure that we provide a citation. Even if it's paraphrased, we need to provide a citation to be academically honest in that way. It needs to be clear to our reader what information comes from the literature and what are our own ideas. So make that clear in the way that you lead into the ideas from the literature, in the way that you include direct quotes. So you've got those quotation marks to be clear in that way, and you provided a correct citation. When you include work from the literature, it's not, your assignment is not your capacity to find an appropriate resource and plonk it in. You need to be able to think about it. Obviously, you're paraphrasing as well, but provide some analysis for your reader. Why should they care? Explain the significance, explain the impacts, that kind of thing. So when we are referencing, we'll need to do that in two places in our text. First is the in-text citation, next to the idea that you writing about in your assignment, and then that corresponds to an entry at the end of your assignment, whether in list, entitled references, and that'll be all the different sources that you used in your particular task. A little bit different annotated bibliography. You're going to put each text at the beginning and then talk about it. But generally speaking, if you're writing about them in a paragraph, the in-text citation is within the narrative, and then that matches up to more information at the end of your work. Now you can find resources on how to reference on the referencing page in the student portal, and we'll include links on how to get there. The two main resources that we use are the academic referencing tool and the APA referencing summary. For in-text citations, we need to include an author date. APA is sometimes called an author date style, and they're the two things that you must include for your in-text citation. You can also include a page number or a section identifier. You must include that for a direct quote, but it's kind of optional for paraphrased information. Now, some sources are not going to have a page number, things like internet-based sources. So it might be instead of a page number that you include a paragraph number or, for example, conclusion section. If you look on the second page of the referencing summary, one of our resources, there's a lot of explanation on what you can do there and how you include section identifier information. So the different ways that we include in-text citations, first we could do it parenthetically. So the parenthetical citation includes all the citation information within the parentheses, the round brackets, in this case, directly following the idea that we've included in our work, and we've got that before the full stop. It doesn't have to be at the end of the sentence, but in this case it is. The second one is a narrative citation. And in this one, we've got the author's names written in the sentence itself. So I've got current research by Smith and Kennedy, then within the parentheses, 2010, and the page number indicates that blah, 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 whatever it is. Now, another way that you can include citation information is using either one of those, parenthetically or as a narrative citation. And it might be that you've got a longer section of text, maybe a few sentences in a row that are from the same source. We're being transparent in what comes from the literature and what are our own ideas. So in our language, we could express that. So we could have our first sentence with the citation in it, and then this research demonstrated that blah, blah, blah. And that kind of tells the reader that that information comes from that source. But also we could mention the source in the first sentence again, either parenthetically or narrative way of presenting citation information, and then separate the page number or the section identifier. That tells the reader that all the information that comes from the author and the date at the beginning and the page number at the end comes from that particular source. You could include a page number. As I said previously, you could include a paragraph number. If you've got more than one page, so it could be that you're summarising something, you could put, instead of P, full stop, space 12, you could be 12 to 18, for example. So it could be PP for more than one page, full stop, space, and then 12-18, for example. Different ways that you can include that section into identifier. So a few things that I want to point out to you so that you know how to present them correctly. The citation is part of your sentence, so the full stop comes afterwards. You can also have a practice of being able to paraphrase and include a citation by looking at that information from the Davison source, seeing if you can have a go. You could pause the video now and paraphrase the information and provide a citation. If you want help with that, you could make an appointment with an academic skills advisor to see how you're going in that way as well. When we have got the citation page number, we've got to make sure all the spacing's in the right spot. So here I've just pointed out the P, full stop, space, and then the page number. And can you see the ampersand, the symbol within the citation between Smith and Kennedy? That's what we use within the parentheses. We also correspondingly use that in our reference list at the end of our work as well. On the other hand, we use the word "and" within the narrative, because we typically don't use symbols like ampersand within the sentence itself. And you can see in these red arrow pointing parts that the author and the date are always next to each other. They're always next door neighbours, but the page number or section identified, that can be separated. Now, generally for a hard copy book, you would look a few pages in and you'll be able to find the correct citation information, all the things that you need to present a reference list entry. If you're going into the library search page, often before you even click on a source, you'll be able to find most of the information you need. Sometimes you might need to investigate further for extra things, but largely before you even click on a source, you'll be able to find everything that you need for the bibliographic information for your reference list entries. So I've got an example here of a book. I've got one author, it's got a title, you've got the publisher and the edition number, etc. Date of publication. This is the information that you're going to need to include in your reference list entries. Now, if you use the academic referencing tool or the referencing summary, you can have a look and see what goes where, what punctuation is used, when capital letters are used, and when italics or not are used. So if we go to the student portal, we can go to the referencing page, the referencing summary, and on this front page here, the contents, I've got the different source types. If I wanted to find out books, I could find out what I need to put where and what punctuation, italics or not, and capital letters or not goes where. And we would just copy along with that, with our information, and put them in the right place. That's what you need to do. So if you would like to have a go at putting these different sources into correct APA-style reference list entries, that might be an activity that gives you confidence to be able to do that effectively when you come to doing your assignments. So whether it's a book or a journal article or a website or whatever it is, find an appropriate model in the referencing tool or the referencing summary and be able to apply those different things. If we go back to the presentation now, you can see here I've included the place of publication. In the 6th edition of APA, you needed to include that, but we no longer need to do that. So there are a few little changes from APA 6 to APA 7. One is that we don't need to include place of publication anymore. We have got a consistent way of presenting web pages as well as what's called the DOI. And if you look at the referencing summary or the referencing tool, you'll be able to see the models there. There's less guesswork and that kind of thing. For our in-text citations too, it's a little bit simpler in terms of understanding what you're expected to do. So for one author, in text, we are always writing that author. 2, we're always writing both of those authors. If you've got 3 or more, you are just writing the first author's name and then et al, which just means and others in Latin. And if you look at the referencing summary of the tool, you'll see how to do that, and there'll be models there, and you can just copy along with the source information that you have. So if we've looked at the referencing summary, the referencing tool, you can see this is how you present that information. So we've got the author information, date information, the title. In this case, we've got an edition number, so we put that in too, and then a publisher. We have got the author surname first, and then a comma, and then the initials with the full stops in between them, the date in brackets, the full stop after it, and then the title is in what's called sentence case. So it's written like, capitalised like a sentence. So the beginning of a sentence always has a capital letter, and any proper nouns. Title case, on the other hand, is we capitalise all the important words. But for this, for book titles, we're just capitalising it like a sentence. If it had a subtitle, we would put a colon in there and then start a new sentence. This has got an addition, and that title is in italics. Then we've got an addition number in brackets, written as an ordinal number. So we're not writing SECOND. It's second with a number 2 and D. Small e, small d, full stop within brackets, and then the publisher is Blackwell, full stop. Okay, so that's the sorts of things that we need to pay attention to when we look at the models and apply our source information to those models. Likewise, we've got a book here. You might like to have a go and see if you can write it yourself. And this is what it should look like. Now you might also notice that it's got what's called a hanging indent. Now if you're in Word, so that hanging indent, the second and subsequent lines are a little bit more right aligned, the top line is always a little bit more left aligned. That hanging indent is easily achievable by highlighting your list and pressing Control T if you've got a PC, and Command T if you've got a Mac, and that will format that appropriately. If you've got, you could also highlight the list and play around with the rulers. Don't put tabs and spaces in there, it'll mess things up and waste a lot of time. Make sure that you just do it most easily by highlighting the list, press Control T. And your list is in alphabetical order by author's name too. We've got a book here. See if you can have a go at doing that one. Look at the referencing summary or the referencing tool. How would you apply those models to this particular book? It should look like this. Now we've got a chapter in an edited book. Now an edited book might have a range of different authors that write different chapters or articles within a book. So it's presented a little bit differently. If you've just read one of the articles, then this is a model. You can use a model to be able to find that. So find a model on chapter in an edited book in the referencing summary or the referencing tool, and you present it this way. So we've got the author information the same way again, the date in brackets, and the title of the chapter in sentence case, but not in italics this time. So the overall publication is in italics. And then we've got in, and then the editor's names. I've got the initial first this time, and then the author, then the surnames, ampersand between the author's names. Within the brackets, I've got eds because that Chenoweth and Sanderson are the editors of this particular book, and the book is called Cow-Calf Production Medicine. And you can find that chapter on those pages within that book, and then the publisher. So make sure you know what type of source that you're reading. You find the model in the tools, the resources that we've got, and that you apply them. Just giving you a lot of practice here to be able to see those patterns. You don't need to be able to memorize how to do all of these things. If you've got the resources in front of you, just check them as you're going. Now see if you can work out which one of these citations is correct. So the second one is correct. There's a few things wrong with that top one. So we have the author's first names written first and in full. We haven't got the correct punctuation there as well. We've got the title is written with we've got a capital S there that shouldn't be there, and it's not in italics. We've got the second edition written the wrong way. It should be within brackets, and the ordinal number with a lowercase ed, full stop. And so these are the sorts of things that you can hopefully now think about when you are including your reference list entries. Here is another one. This one has a DOI. DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier, and this is the way that you present DOI information now. And the DOI, any source that has a DOI, they all start with https://doi.org/10, and then those string of letters and numbers that follow are unique to that particular article, whatever it is. This is the way that we now present DOIs. It could be done in a variety of different ways previously in the 6th edition. This is the way that we do it now. This is the way to present that particular source in APA 7th edition. I've got another one here. This DOI presented this way, we will need to convert that to the correct way of presenting the DOI. That's how we would do that then. Solution. So if you can work out which of those two examples are correct, have a guess. The top one is correct, and I've just pointed out the things that are incorrect about the bottom one there. Which of those two is correct? This one's a bit harder, it doesn't look quite as messy. So the top one is correct, and there's a few things wrong there. So as I said, the referencing page has our resources to do with referencing, mostly the referencing tool and the referencing summary, but there's also the APA blog, which is put out by the official APA people. They've got lots of different articles on aspects of referencing and writing in APA style, and it is searchable. It's got a Google bar within the site, and so if there are things that not quite sure about, you can search that. In our Study Success tab in Interact 2, we also have our forum, and a lot of the questions that are asked on our forum, the Ask Academic Skills forum, are to do with referencing. It is monitored every day, including weekends, so if you've got quick questions about referencing, you get a bit stuck, you can ask them on that forum as well. Or make an appointment with an academic skills advisor. We're more than happy to help you out. That's where you can find that. So they're the resources. All the other resources that are to do with study skills are on the left-hand side there. So you can access them that way. And I've got a range of different resources to help you out that you might like to use in terms of being an effective researcher for your assignments. Thanks for listening, and all the best with your studies.